So this is our annual kind of check-in, not only on fiscal 2020, but we're going to give you an update on the current fiscal year and then an outlook going all the way out to 2026. Today, a special version of this is also going to be available in Scottish. So I'm going to ask Mr. Durkin to come up and give you a little bit of an economic update before I get into my portion of the show.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Casey. I'll try my best to tone down the Scottish accent, but I make no promises. So as Mr. Harris said, I'm just going to give you an economic overlook. I think it's especially important right now as we're proposing our 2021 amendments and as we develop our 2022 budget, and this economic forecast really underpins the entire thing that we are doing right now. And so I'll get into the details of this chart in a second, but it really kind of nicely captures what's happened over the last few months economically. You can see that when the pandemic took hold, we had a precipitous drop in economic activity. And over the last few months, we've really seen it rebound. But one of the things we'll point out is that, GDP's improved, personal consumption expenditures have improved. So on a national level, the indices look as though they're doing well. But one of the things we've done as an organization, which ahead of our peers really, is to really pivot to more of the kind of real-time data. And by doing that, as quickly as this pandemic took hold, having that data allows us to really see in real time almost where things are going to go. And so by looking at that really helps us forecast where things will be going. And when you look at that underlying data, the picture isn't necessarily as strong. So while things are improving, we're really at an inflection point, I would say, in terms of recovery right now. And the two main things I would say that will drive how this recovery takes hold is, the spread of the virus and any other federal stimulus that we may receive in the next few months. So with this chart is two of the kind of real-time data sets. One of them is the weekly economic index, which is a composite of various indices from federal withholding taxes to initial unemployment claims to freight railroad traffic to electricity output. And then the other one that you can see is the news sentiment index, which looks at 200 leading newspapers across the nation and looks at the sentiment in those articles, whether the tone's positive, neutral, or negative in nature. Now, we've all seen in the last few days, and especially today, again, the vaccine announcements from Pfizer and Moderna and the 95% effectiveness. We would expect to see, in that news sentiment, a kind of upward swing. The thing I will point out right now, though, is that, it's not a panacea straight away. It's going to take a few months for that to really feed through to the entire population. So that'll kind of counterweight the positive aspect of that news as well. The longer this pandemic takes hold, the unemployment situation may remain elevated. So we'd expect potentially, if the employment situation improves, that economic index to either keep going up or it could start to plateau. Really, we're at an inflection point right now. So one of the things that we also look at on a local level is, our employment situation. And so you hear the national headline rates, the local rates, but it doesn't really give you a picture of what's going on. So one of the ways that we look at it is how long is it taking the labour market to recover to its pre-recessionary peak? And so you can see from the chart, we looked at the last four recessions, 1990, 2000, 2008, and the current one that we're in. In the first two, the labour market recovered pretty quickly within a 12-month time frame. The Great Recession, as you can see, employment figures didn't return to the pre-recession level until 61 months after the downturn started. And unsurprisingly, with the current situation that we're in, we had a precipitous drop. Our employment situation has improved, but as you can see from that chart right now, we're almost at an inflection point again, especially as we head into this holiday season and caseload starting to go up. When you couple that with the fact that, the vaccine may not be available for months, the employment situation really could go either way. And if you couple that with the federal stimulus, a lot of those extended unemployment programs are beginning to run out. One of them actually runs out, I believe, on the 26th of December. If those don't come into effect shortly, that could also affect the employment situation. So really right now, the recovery in terms of the labour market, personally, I would expect it wouldn't take as long as the last recession of 61 months. But it really, right now, as I say, the inflection point, it could either take a little longer, 12 to 18 months or shorter. It really just depends on how this vaccine spreads and the stimulus situation. Now into some more positive news. When we revised our budget back in March, I don't think anyone could have stood here and said we'd expect our sales tax to go up, which they have. We actually got the latest numbers yesterday. Year-over-year growth for our September sales was actually up 9.8%, ahead of the state collections at 8.6%. We don't have the full statewide data yet, but I would expect that we would remain the third largest locality in the state with populations of 100,000 or more, with increased collections. Again, as we head into that holiday season, we'd expect these to remain elevated, but if the situation economically goes a little bit south, it may temper back. One of the things I will point out here is that when we developed our 2021 adopted budget, we projected a 26% decrease in our sales tax. So even with the amendments we're going to propose to you tonight for the public hearing, we're still in a conservative posture with regards to our sales tax numbers as well as our other revenue sources. And then finally, I'd like to point out our housing situation. As everyone's well aware, this was the cause of the last downturn, and this is actually one of the bright spots that we have in our current situation. September sales, the median single-family house price reached $315,000, which is a 19.3% year-over-year growth. That helps us from a revaluation standpoint. As you'll remember, when we adopted the budget, we had projected minus 2.5% in our residential reevaluation rate. Based on the numbers we're seeing, we'll be into positive territory, which obviously helps as the real estate is our largest revenue driver. So with that, before I turn it over to Mr. Harris, does anyone have any questions?
You mentioned the reval rate.
Yes.
Last budget. What was that reval rate for the last budget? Negative or positive?
For the 2021 that we adopted, we had assumed a minus 2.5%. Yeah.
21 budget. Okay.
Yep.
Would just point out that the sales tax numbers being what they are really underscores the purchasing power of Chesterfield County citizens. And, we've really finally, for maybe the first time, gotten a real look at what that is during this pandemic. So, just in terms of guiding future decisions, something to keep in mind.
So the balance of the presentation kind of gets more into the budget side itself. So there's a lot of moving parts here, so we'll go slow. We got plenty of time this afternoon. Again, we're going to touch on a lot of fiscal years, and I'll sort of hit on those break points as we go. First and foremost, we just closed out fiscal 20. You have Mr. Churchman coming tonight from Cherry Becker. He'll give you a very glowing report on the audits. I'll save that for this evening, but sort of won't get into the financials themselves. So that's what we're going to do for the series of the next couple slides. The slides up here now is looking at the school division's year-end results for fiscal 20, again, in 630. This is a traditional action and topic that's before you in the November timeframe. They send a paper over. It's attached as part of your agenda packet tonight, what they are requesting the Board of Supervisors to do with these funds. And just as a little note for our newer members, we hold all of these funds. We sort of short the transfer at the end of the day, whatever the savings are, we hold on our side, and hence why you are in this mechanical situation right now where they're asking to do things with those funds because they are held on the county side, and we've done it that way for many years. All in all, they had positive operations of just under $17 million, you see on the slide, and they were requesting that those be reinvested in three primary ways. First and foremost, as we've done for a number of years, debt service reserve. We have used one-time monies to help smooth out curves in debt service. As you're all aware, that's sometimes hard it gets a few sharp edges on it. So we have had this debt service reserve policy for a number of years, and it's worked very, very well. It really helped us climb that last $100 million when we expanded out the 2013 referendum. And so this is a continuation of that. No issues. We are not actually transferring this back to them right now. We would hold it on our side for that specific purpose. So the board's being asked to make an assignment to that effect. Second, the school board is asking to have reappropriated and transferred back to them about $8.2 $8.7 million, $8.2 million rather, for a one-time 2% bonus. As we'll touch on the county side, we both had a 2% merit increase when we stood up in this room back in late February. They are revisiting that topic in the form of a bonus. I know there's been some discussion in the newspapers and elsewhere about, can you use one-time monies for a bonus? Can you use it to support the teacher pay plan, which is now starting to come through the process? Just for clarity's sake, staff has no problem certainly with a bonus, but also using it in a responsible fashion to help stand up a pay plan. So, either way you can go is fine. You certainly wouldn't run a pay plan solely on one-time money, but you could use it to sort of get it off the ground sooner than later, but you'd have to have a multi-year implementation strategy we'll show you on our side relative to public safety to make sure you could sustain it. So just a note, because that question has come up. We've gotten it from the media last day or two.
And just to kind of go back to that, so that would be similar to what we were considering doing if we're talking about the pay study, for instance. That would be similar to what we're considering doing this year to kick off the public safety, using savings that public safety has provided in this fiscal year to kick off the pay study. And so that would be sort of an equivalent analysis, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We'll touch on that in more detail as we get into the next slides, but you're absolutely right. It's the same concept as what I'm referring to, is what we'll touch on in a second relative to public safety. And then lastly, really a continuation from what the superintendent set out last year, some security upgrades and other things in elementary and middle schools to finish out that slate of improvements. They've done this for a number of years. Some one-time capital investments, certainly no issues with that. That's a reappropriate and transfer to finish that off. And we're happy to get you those list of schools if you would like that information. Schools did do a briefing on this topic at their last meeting, and certainly no issues there. One procedural note, and this is true for everything we're going to talk about tonight except for CARES, and that is we are not asking the board to do any of this tonight because of the amount, the magnitude of the dollars we're discussing. It triggers a public hearing requirement for us as 1% of the overall budget. We're well in excess of that, as we'll see as we move forward. So all we're doing tonight, this work session, is really in front of a request to set a public hearing for December 16th. So everything I'm telling you is informational. We have plenty of time. We're treating this as a small budget process. The public will have time to weigh in. So this item, whatever the outcome is, can't be taken up by this board in full until 12/16. Shifting gears to the county side, two slides here. First, look at the sources. So overall, on the county side, our surplus for fiscal 2020, $54.5 million. Really a healthy balance of revenue expenditures. We're typically more revenue heavy when it comes to year-end surpluses, but all the expenditure controls that were put into place immediately by this board, by the administration, really helped to give a more robust outcome when we got to 6:30, and that's what you see here in front of you tonight. The second line there, you do have encumbrances, you have purchases that are in progress, and then we have legally restricted revenues that we can't otherwise spend. Those automatically go in the bank with a label on them that says do not touch if, except for this purpose, essentially. So you deduct that off, you have a net balance of $40.7 million, and then as I'll touch on in the next slide, staff is asking the board to consider the appropriation of $13 million of existing revenues from a prior year to deal with some specific purchases or proposed purchases, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. So all in all, your budget, your available resources from fiscal 20 primarily, and then a little bit of pre-existing reserves is just a hair under $54 million. So what will we propose to do with those funds? This slide lays that out. The biggest ticket item on here is really a continuation of something the board's been talking about. Good times, bad times. It's been a staple of Chesterfield County planning for some time, and that is looking for that next economic development opportunity. Don't always know when that day is going to come, when that phone call is going to come in, but we know we need to be prepared, and it's a byproduct of the success that Mr. Hart and his team have had. You'll hear him talk every time he sees you, I'm sure, that he is running out of product, and this action that we're asking here on the $24 million is really about restocking the cupboard so that when those companies come forward. We all know the truth that they want something that is basically turnkey, ready to go. So we're trying to make sure that we keep plenty of tools in Mr. Hart's toolkit. So that $24 million would go to basically an account that would allow us to be very nimble and responsive to those opportunities as they arose. Now, of that $13 million in prior year revenues that I touched on in the previous slide, 11 of this 24 comes from business license taxes that have been held in surplus in prior years, and that's been our longstanding agreement with the business community. When that happens, we reinvest those dollars back into future economic development opportunities, continuation of a policy that brought us Meadowville and many, many other successes, and really just continuing down that road. Capital facility sites, this is a relatively new practice for the county, but doing really kind of that same concept on the economic development side on the county capital facility side. So we don't always know when a piece of property is going to become available, but if it has strategic interest for us for a future school site, fire station site, park site, whatever it might be, we want to make sure we have dollars set aside to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. There's nothing special about $3 million, but it's what we felt like we could work out of this matrix, and that would go into that bank account. That exists and has a balance in it today, but would allow us to be very responsive. We're looking at a referendum at some point in the future. It's very helpful to have those land purchases already taken care of to the greatest extent possible. Lastly, a small item on there, the credit union building on the campus. There's been a change there in ownership, and we have an opportunity to buy that facility. It would make a nice county facility at some point for some future use. Hopefully somebody that's in lease space bringing it back onto the footprint of the campus and having a nice building right there where the citizens can interact with us. So a small price tag, but really a good deal on that piece. The middle ground there, we're looking at some capital items, continuation again. Not a lot of new themes here, but really doubling down on what has worked for us. River City continues to be the crown jewel of our tourism program, still to this day, still even in pandemic times. I just looked at some of the hotel tax numbers, and from a percentage perspective, in terms of where we were a year ago to where we are now, we are definitely pacing the region in terms of activity, and a lot of that has to do with River City. And so this would allow us to continue those investments there with a championship field, going in and putting some bleachers around one of those fields. That seems to be one of the things we've worked very, very closely with Richmond Region Tourism and sort of getting their analysis, and then be able to speed up some of the turf replacements out there as well. So $3 million. Again, all of that money, similar to some of the economic development pieces, comes from restricted revenues from hotels. So we get excess revenues from hotels. We reinvest into that space, and that continuous cycle has really paid a lot of dividends for us. Capital project funding just would provide some gap funding on a number of projects that we are starting to get stood back up now. On the other side, or hopefully the tail end of the pandemic, starting to look back at our capital program, and this would give us some flexibility to deal with some of those pricing things that might come in. If not, it's just a capital reserve for some future day. We have the COPS grant equipment. This board approved 15 positions through a federal grant several meetings back. This 936 would cover all the one-time items associated with that. And then, as we always like to do, our grounds maintenance crew, that tends to be one of those things we're not as attentive to as we'd like to be, trying to catch up there in terms of just that equipment that they use every day to make our facilities look nice. So worked with Mr. Smet and his team at a modest request. Similar to schools, but a little bit different, a one-time bonus is part of this plan. It would be a flat bonus, $500 for any full-time county employee, $250 for any benefit-eligible part-time employee. But this is really kind of to recognize the efforts, the sacrifices. You heard, Jesse, I couldn't have had a better warm-up back there in terms of shutdown for one day. This organization, again, took one day off. We put up some plexiglass, put up some signs. We got back to work, and I think this is a recognition of that. So a $500 would go in kind of in between the holidays there, and still be very much in keeping with kind of our earlier plans back from February. That only spends 38.6 of the total. What we would do with the rest of it, Mrs. Haley, you've already pointed out part of this, $8.7 million savings from public safety agencies would be set aside to sustain the public safety pay plan. I'm pleased to report we do not need this 8.7 to get it off the ground, but what we want to do, I'm talking with all of you and your experiences, to make sure we have some dollars already in the bank to, if that first lean year that comes up, if the pay plan is approved, that we've got some resources to keep it going. We don't have to think about where that first, I think that really, looking at it conservatively, you got about 3 years of coverage in that number, and Mr. Carroll has been an advocate of even looking at a financial policy that we will bring you back potentially in December, if you so choose, that says we want to actually make that a recurring financial policy, that any savings out of that category set aside for this purpose, so that we, it's one thing to stand the plan up, but we want to make sure that we can live up to that promise moving forward. And then lastly, $6.5 million just set aside in the bank for future revenue stabilization issues. That's just a general reserve that we've done many times. Any questions about fiscal 20 county or schools before we move into modern day?
By any chance, can you just off the top of your head even come close on a number of what a one-time $500 bonus would look like on the school side if that was the approach they applied?
Yeah, Ms. Haley, I think for just conversational purposes, this is going to be about half of what you saw a couple slides back. So it'd be $4 million and some change would be my guess. I mean, we're typically 2x, or they're typically 2x of us. So without a spreadsheet, that's what I would tell you.
Versus the 8.2 that they're intending to put towards a one-time bonus, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so I mean, I just have to candidly say that it's just very troubling to me, and I hope that our colleagues on the school side hear this, that it's very troubling to me, because I think the whole purpose of the bonus, as you see in our implementation on the county side, is to make certain that those of our folks who are boots on the ground every day and maybe not at our highest salary levels are really being given a favorable thank you. And for schools, I know that there are a significant number of people over there too who have been boots on the ground, and that the 2% is not going to mean as much to them as it means to their top administration, and yet, a one-time across the board, I think, would be a much more favorable approach that would also show their commitment to what they intend to bring forward to us, I believe, in our liaison committee meeting on the 30th in their pay plan. And so, again, I know I'm preaching to the choir and speaking to the folks in this room, but I think it's important that we're going to be looking for some collaboration from our colleagues on the school board and from the school administration to be as committed in their reserves and in other opportunities with financial savings if this pay plan is a priority.
Madam Chair, I have to agree with your comments and the thrust of them. I look in the back of the room and I see our folks in police and in fire, and we have folks who've gone to work every single day, and many of them deal with people with COVID directly every single day or every other day. And not to say that school employees have not dealt with similar challenges, but these folks are 24/7, 7 days a week. And so I do think your comments are very much in line with mine, and would urge the school board to take another look at that and perhaps even consider adopting a flat fee across the board. I think that really sends a good message this year of teamwork as we all pull together in the same direction.
That is a good point. I concur with you. And so the bonus, I think, is a very good idea. The one thing I'm looking forward to, however, is once we see, and you can let me know when we will see the teacher school system pay plan. I want to know where we are, because we are very fortunate this year to have $54.4 million reserves. I've seen different amounts, 17 million, 27 million, and this is like a bounty when you think about it relative to prior years that I've looked at the financials. And so and this also provides, as we see with the public safety pay plan, this also provides an excellent opportunity to fund it initially which is always a challenge, and then to continue it and sustain it. And so therein is where your reserves and stabilization funds from not only the prior years that we've set aside, we've done a number in prior years, but also this year, as we set aside reserves as well, the 8.7 million. So I think that's something we need to keep as well in the forefront. How we're going to deal with the teacher pay plan, and how we're going to fund it, and how we'll help sustain it. Because at the end of the day, it all revolves around the county, how the county coffers look relative to transfers to schools. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Allen, I think Ms. Haley referenced it, but Liaison is taking up that item at their meeting on the 30th of this month, and you know, I'm sure there will be much dialogue after that as we move forward.
Madam Chair, I guess we'll get more of an update on the pay plan.
I'm just taking an intermission here. We have much more to go.
Well, I'll speak when we get to that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So let's get on to fiscal 21. Just real quick, because I think it's always important, you know, before we talk about what we're going to potentially ask to add back to the budget, remember what we did in this room, you know, roughly 9 months ago. The budget that's in place now is $52 million less than the original proposal that was brought forth to the board. But that wasn't done in a uniform fashion in terms of those reductions. The school transfer, even after taking 52 out, was still plus $10 million. This board really made that a priority area. So if you think about that, that's really effectively a $62 million cut because you had to figure out how to carve that out somewhere else. Similar stance was taken with frontline public safety, no impacts to staffing. In fact, we invested in a handful of staffing initiatives that are up there on the screen, and also found other specialized things such as the elections, really the largest investment in the election process that a board has ever undertaken as part of this budget. We saw some of the outcomes from that trust as far as the funds go, and well as major maintenance held to our 2.5% goal. So we found a way to keep those core things in place, but really still be able to cut, you know, again, effectively more than $60 million out of it. And a lot of that was done, it's been touched on here already, really through the work of the workforce here in Chesterfield County. And the rest of the amendments that we're going to talk about is really about the board's desire to reinvest in the workforce, a much leaner, more efficient, you know, you see the technology things that are being put in place, our ability to pivot to remote work and all of those things. So the balance of this presentation is how do you reinvest in that workforce that has performed so well during some very, very tough times. So let's first talk about some restorations before we talk about what we would add to this. And you see here broken out in a few major categories. Personnel, what we're recommending tonight is to really lift the hiring freeze that's been in place. You know, our vacancies swole from about roughly runs between 100 and 120 on the general government side to almost up to 200 over this period. And that's just not something you can sustain, but, you know, really have to thank all the departments that made that work and carried that burden for that period of time. So it's still, you know, pending administrative approval to have those positions put back, but it is an easier road to do so. Part-time staffing, we still have some folks out on furlough. We would put the resources back to be able to bring those, rejoin those folks to the workforce. COVID protocols and all of those things permitting. Career development programs, as they existed when we passed the budget, that would be turned back on. Any promotional items, we had a lot of people that had qualified, and those things were just shut down overnight. We would restore those and make good on all of those promises. That has a total price tag there of about $4.3 million. We also slashed training budgets. We need to go get some of that back. People need to be able to maintain their certifications and items like that. Some structural things, not a whole lot to worry about there. As I mentioned, our pass-through payments to the convention center have been much better than we forecasted, much better than our regional peers, quite frankly. So that item, while it looks like a expenditure increase, is really just a byproduct of the economic success that we continue to see. So it's just a pass-through. And then tax relief. The state just sent us a early Christmas present in November for personal property for 100% disabled vets, as well as the program has just continued to grow. You had a nice presentation, and if we haven't done it already, we need to get that to the full board. The Finance Committee heard that at their meeting last week. Really, again, partnered with VCU as sort of a capstone effort. really nice summary of where we're at and some recommendations and some comparable metrics in there. So we'll get that out to everyone, but we continue to see the program grow even without program modifications. There's a few that are, potentially listed in there, but this $2.4 million, again, making good on the promises of that program. So again, that's sort of the restorations, a relatively light list in the grand scheme of things. So what are the amendments? What are the things we would truly do different to this budget? And again, it's all focused on the workforce. The headline here, of course, is Public Safety Pay Plan, the largest investment in our public safety workforce in the county's history. There's just no other way to describe it. An annualized cost of $13.5 million. We wouldn't spend all of that this year. We've got a two-phase implementation that we would do. As you saw when the consultant was here, there was always been 2 phases. We would turn the first phase on in early January on whatever payroll that worked out to. The first phase is really what deals with the compression adjustment. Talking to the consultant, phase 1 eliminates compression within our public safety agencies once that is in place. Phase 2 is about creating that predictable step system in all 3 agencies, police, fire, and sheriff, so that we have that. Folks know where they're going to go through the course of their career. They have a very good sense of that. That's really important in the public safety agencies. And phase 2 creates that. We would put that in place beginning early April, similar to what we're talking about here. But it's one vote in December at the public hearing. If the pay plan is approved there through the appropriations, there's not another vote on that. It is fully in place by early April, both phases, and then we, as I'll show you in a minute, we've already worked that, how that could be sustained over the course of the next coming 5-year plan. So we have taken that to heart, and we do believe, standing here tonight, that it is something we can sustain, even though, like I said, it's the largest investment we've ever done in this particular space. So very good news. We talked about the reserve that we've asking to establish. We could bring back the financial policy. Anything we can wrap around it to support the continuation of the pay plan, we want to do so. But public safety is certainly just part of the team here. We have a 2% merit for all other general government employees not covered in the pay plan. So if you're in a public safety agency but not a sworn individual, that's covered under that, and you qualify. Again, this is a merit-based program. We've just gone through, even during the pandemic, we went through employee reviews for everyone. If you qualify through that program, you would get the 2%, again, early January. And we would run that actually for 12 months through December of next year. So sort of change that anniversary date. Again, that helps us to control the cost a little bit, but get dollars in employees' checks sooner than later that are going to be there, are going to be part of their retirement. So it's a blend between the bonus and this, but overall, if you look at the fiscal year cost of those 2 pieces, we're not spending any more money than what I stood up here in February and said we were going to do. We've just been able to figure out that way to do it in a sort of creative way that helps employees now and over the course of their career and helps them to continue to grow, which I think is a nice way to do that. A couple other modest service enhancements. These would be sort of positional things, and I'll touch on these. Again, the COPS grant, we already touched on the one-time aspects of that, but we do need to pay for those 15 positions for 6 months. That's what you see there. We did have a lot of furloughs, as you know, in our library system, but they've been really crucial to getting us through the pandemic, providing a wide range of services. So what we've been endeavoring to do for a number of years is change that ratio of part-time to full-time librarians. We have more work to do. 10 is not going to get us there. But the thought process is, as we're rehiring those positions, let's try to do it in a full-time capacity. You'll probably see a phase 2 of this plan, I would imagine, with your formal FY22 budget that comes back to you in March. But this is a nice start, and just want to put that initiative on your radar screen. It's been more of a 40-60 kind of model, and with part-time being the larger of those 2, and that's not something you necessarily can sustain, especially if we've seen the value that libraries can have, like we've witnessed for the last 6 months or so. A couple other positions that I'll just reference, I won't touch on all these, but the strategic real estate position, economic development, we've got all of those funds being set aside to take advantage of those opportunities, look for those next sites for facilities, for economic development. This is really establishing that position that wakes up every single day and thinks about that topic and is out there looking for those things and making sure we're using those funds in a most strategic manner possible. And we still got some unallocated here, $137,000. Always want to have some flexibility. Things are going to come up over the course of the next 7 months that we can't predict, and this gives us a little bit of flexibility to deal with those things. On the capital side, this would be sort of the one, neutral item in here. Putting the public safety pay plan in and doing it now and getting it stood up immediately within the course of this fiscal year, it does put a little bit of weight on our capital program. And I think the word that's in the slide is subdued. I think that's a very apt description of what we're looking at there. I think what I'm telling you standing here tonight is we've kind of developed a little simple model in terms of this 5-year plan such that we have a very, very aggressive approach to debt. So we pay it off level principal. So every year we create savings in a debt service budget. At a minimum, you could reinvest that savings back into capital facilities. And there you see just an example on your screen, $20 million in new debt could be available by fiscal 23, just by doing nothing else because of the way that we structure it. We want to get those principal payments off the books as soon as possible. I think there's upside in that, as Mr. Durkin's economic forecast gets better, as other priorities kind of shake out and we decide, staffing versus compensation versus capital, we can add to this. But at a minimum, what we're kind of doing in the 5 years, and we're not going to recognize any debt service savings in capital, and we're going to reinvest that into the plan. That doesn't rule out a referendum. It probably makes it a smaller referendum as we stand here without, some a revenue source dedicated within the plan or some other avenue to get there. But we still have a path forward on the capital front. And what you're doing tonight on the public safety pay plan, on the compensation for general government, is not pushing this completely off the table, but it is putting some pressure on it for sure. Not going to go through every line of this, but I think it's just really important for us as finance staff, for you to know, for the public to know that we have thought
Can I
through.
stop you?
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
stop you? Something just hit me. So when you think back to that whole aspect of debt and the funding, all of this talks about the aspect of us funding the public safety pay study. None of this is taking into any kind of consideration of what this teacher pay study looks like because we haven't seen it yet. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. We've got that note here in a minute, but I think if we back up to this slide right here, our revised revenue forecast for the current year, without having, I don't have final real estate numbers, so it gets a little bit difficult to do that. But we're, conservatively saying we got about $31.5 million of additional capacity. The amendments that we're talking about with you tonight relative to all the things we talked about only use up about 14.6 of that. Now, some of these items are going to have a doubling effect because we're dealing with half-year pricing. So, all of that isn't available. What the point is, even though we feel like revenues are doing better, we are not bringing you a plan that absorbs all of that capacity because we recognize there's other things that are going to be brought to the table. And like I said, these costs are going to go up on a 12-month basis. But on the upside, we think that we're still conservative, still cautious on the revenue side, and we will see that. I think home values are going to be stronger than even what you're seeing here. So we've still got some capacity to plan. We have not pushed this as a proposal, an overall proposal, to the limit by any stretch of the imagination. Again, the only message here is that sustainability of what we're talking about. Again, this 5-year model does have a nice transfer to schools in it. It's not anything that we'll live by. This will change 1,000 times before you see it again. But just so you know, we've thought through every single line item, and we call it the 5.5-year plan here because that's basically what it is. But we've completely redone that down to every single line item. We believe in the sustainability of what we're talking about, not just for public safety pay, but for all of these items. The last thing I want to do is come back to you in March and say, everything we talked about in November has to be unwound because we missed our ability to be able to replicate that year after year. So we have done this work, and we will continue to refine this framework, but always thinking about that multi-year approach. Shifting gears a little bit to CARES, you've got an item on your consent agenda tonight to rebalance the CARES allocation. The guidance, the only thing that you can say about CARES is guidance is it's always changing. By the time I get back to my office, there's probably a new rule book in my inbox. But as we know it today, and since we talked about it publicly with you last time, the guidance has been relaxed quite a bit on the county and schools. And so what we're asking to do tonight is to rebalance under that new rule book, as well as the governor did award an additional $11 or so million to the school division. So we would ask to appropriate that into the school division and then take that event and then rebalance the entire allocation such that when 12/30 comes, we can make sure that we stand back up and look at you. We have spent it all in accordance with the CARES guidance. We do believe that to be the case. I have really zero doubt that we'll be able to be in full compliance, use all the money, or allocate it to an eligible expenditure. So a good, positive update on CARES. And then you see there in the middle, the Back in Business grant, the nonprofit round is open up now. The child care, I think you've seen some of the email correspondence from those folks. Are very happy. That was a great success, almost $2 million, 80 different daycares throughout the county. So spirit to Garrett and his team for administering that. That was a very big success. And they have just continued to look for ways to reinvest and to give those that back in business slice of the pie out. We haven't necessarily grown it, but they just have continued to be innovative and find ways to get that in the hands of businesses that are hurting. So summary and next steps. Again, we are asking you to set a public hearing outside of the one CARES piece, which is on consent, which is a pretty, just administrative kind of rebalancing. Asking to set a public hearing for December 16th, overall to appropriate up to $75 million. I recognize all these numbers don't add up to that, but things can change between now and then. We can always come back down to the lower number. So you see a $6.9 million, we're calling contingency. That's just allowing for discussions and other things and refinements over the next 30 days. We want to give the public a chance to weigh in. You see the various pieces of that. The schools, one time from 20, our one time from 20, the 20 amendments for us at the 14.6, and then the contingency piece. And then, we've touched on the highlights here, but I think the main walkaways is really positioning us for continued success in economic development, going out there and looking for that next Medaville type opportunity, as well as, again, can't be said enough times, really making us the preeminent destination for public safety employees in the region with the largest single investment in our public safety workforce in the county's history. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Board members, any questions?
I just have one comment. In regards to the tax relief for the elderly and seniors and veterans, when do we need to act on that recommendation? Once the entire board is informed about that. We had a presentation, by the way, for the board members during finance and audit, and we'll need to act on that because there's a timing to that similar to what the Commissioner of Revenue has to do with regard to the new process and what this board's will is in that regard.
No, and Mr. Allen, we will bring that back to you, whomever is on audit finance, probably in a January timeframe, and make sure that we're coordinating with the commissioner for any changes that are recommended to get that lined up for tax year 2021. With the state actions that just went in place, there's nothing you need to do. That is more done to us than done by us. But we will first share that full deck with the board and then bring that back as an audit finance topic as a follow-up to the briefing that you got last week.